Welcome back, Lemonsterites, for another episode of Representing Leominster. I'm your state representative, Natalie Higgins, and I am so glad to be joined with our state senator, John Cronin, for this week's episode. We are like kind of right in the middle of budget prep. The House is set to take up the budget next month, in the Senate at the end of May. Senator Cronin, thank you so much for taking some time to come on and talk about kind of what's going on at the busiest time of the session.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. It's certainly the busiest time of the year for us, but it's great to be back. I think it was probably a year ago I was last on the show, so I feel like one of those SNL hosts that just keeps getting invited back.
You're going to be the five-timer. We'll get you a special jacket.
Or a robe or something. Yeah, great. But it's good to be here with you.
Yeah, no, thrilled to be here. And it's been really busy for you in the Senate. It's been busy for us in the House. I just want to thank you for passing the bill you passed last week, because it included some of our domestic violence protections, the Phoenix Act. And so thank you for getting that through the Senate. And now we're going to head into conference committee territory.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time at the State House. I think there's a lot of things happening. Especially as we come towards the budget. The budget's where we are able to carry forward a lot of our top priorities. The Senate passed a supplemental budget that has a provision for North Middlesex School District that's going to allow their employees to join GIC by July 1st and hopefully realize $1 million of savings, which is going to keep a lot of teachers employed. So little things like that. There's tons of little provisions that we're able to push through and get to the governor's desk in the budget through the sub-budget process, as you know. So it's certainly the busy season.
And something that we were talking about before we started filming was the Leominster flood. It's just over 6 months, if you can believe it. I had to pull that out of my calendar when we had a Ways and Means hearing last week. And we were meeting with MEMA and the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security to talk about plans for emergency disasters in Massachusetts and what the role the state has to supplement what the federal government's role has been. Because in Leominster, we're learning the hard reality of when a federal declaration doesn't happen or is delayed, we really still need to get help into the community.
I think the toughest issues that we are dealing with as a state are really reckoning with some of the major failures of consensus of any kind on any of the major problems that we face, be they immigration, be they federal disaster relief. I mean, you name it, we're not getting a lot of help from Washington these days. And I think there's blame, there's plenty of blame to go around. With respect to the Leominster floods, it's incredible to think that we're 6 months removed from that. I think we've been focused on short-term relief and longer-term solutions. To your point, I think there's a lot of momentum right now at the state level, and there's an understanding that more of these events are going to happen as the climate changes. We're seeing a lot of them happen. We had significant disasters and flooding in August at our farms and earlier in the summer across the state, where people's livelihoods were wiped out. And the farmers across the state aren't able to access insurance. So I think when you put what's happening to that industry together with the fact that we're going to see more weather events like we saw in Leominster this September together, and then you realize that the federal government isn't always going to be there, right? And I don't have a lot of confidence that the federal government is going to become more responsive after our election in November, unfortunately. The state's going to have to step up, and having a state-level disaster relief fund is going to be a part of that solution. I know one of the things that I'm most proud of that we have accomplished working together was to get funding in a supplemental budget passed into the governor and signed into law that created a disaster relief fund at the end of 2023 to respond to some of these events. But I don't know if you want to kind of give an update on where we are with that.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are, one, helping folks understand, even if the federal government steps in with relief, what that relief looks like.
Right.
And with the maximum award is $41,000 and you've lost your home, that's not going to go very far.
And maybe it doesn't cover individual assistance, right? Yeah.
And then the other challenge of how do we deploy these state funds without messing with our ability to get this federal relief. So some of the conflicting messages that we've gotten, right, of the state funds are going to be deployed. Oh, wait, we need to wait until the federal government makes a decision on the emergency declaration.
And then the federal government says, we're not going to provide relief because you have money that you can spend yourselves. So complicated.
Yeah, and I think just the level of damage and, right, these flood events in communities that have never really seen floods, right?
Sure.
We're not close to a water table, like we're not dealing with that generally, but we're going to see more and more of these extreme weather events, and the damage is significant. We still have families in Leominster who are displaced, trying to figure out how to safely get back into their homes if they can, and the continuing message of like, let's just wait for that application to process,
right,
is really hard.
Yeah. And doesn't help people in our community, right? So, you know, I think one of the things that we are waiting for from the administration that's unfortunately tied up right now with the appeal is in the supplemental budget that passed at the end of 2023 that we worked so hard together, and the North Central delegation really had a huge part in making sure it was included, was $15 million for disaster relief. 10 has been appropriated already. 1.1 million has gone to the city of Fitchburg, which is great, to provide resources for the August floods that they suffered, where there were millions of dollars of damage. But the administration has put aside $5 million from that pot, and you know, we are hoping that those funds get to the city of Leominster, and it'll be split between Leominster and Attleboro. But those funds are coming from the state, and hopefully we'll be here very soon.
And if folks still are having trouble with kind of continued impact from the floods, or we have some families who still have like the water changed in their property, and so there's more and more impact, especially with one more snowstorm or ice storm that we got, even if it was small, it's impacting folks. So reach out to our offices if you haven't been in touch, and we want to make sure that you're getting connected with the resources that are out there to make sure when this relief is deployed, you know how to access it.
And one of my priorities for the budget that we're going to be taking up in the House in April and in the Senate in May, and we'll come together in a conference committee to get those different budgets reconciled into the governors, is coming back and trying to secure more resources for the Leominster Relief Fund. So it's something that we've been committed to, and we're going to deliver in a really meaningful way.
So we're past something called Joint Rule 10, which is when our committees get our bills out. So for folks who don't follow the legislative process closely, there's a date in the calendar that committees have to report our bills out. Are there any legislative successes that you want to highlight, or any bills that are still in play that you're really excited about?
So one of the bills that we were able to get passed in the Senate this year is a bill that I've been working with the Disability Law Center on, and it's a wheelchair consumer protection bill. And this is a problem I really didn't know existed until I started meeting with constituents. But you know, a wheelchair for somebody who is dependent on that chair it is their lifeline, right? If their chair breaks down, they can't get to work, they can't get to the doctors. You know, there are horror stories that I've heard of people being stranded in their homes or in their chairs or in their beds for weeks while they're waiting for repairs. And so, like other parts of our healthcare system, it is a industry that's been consolidated by private equity, and there's a monopoly in the market of people who provide parts and provide repairs for wheelchairs. And so one of the bills that we were able to pass and get passed in the Senate is basically a consumer protection update to our laws, which guarantee that people within 4 days get a loaner chair, so they're not stranded for days or weeks, and they gain their independence and they can live with dignity. And it also gives the Attorney General some teeth. So the wheelchair repair market, the people who provide these services, have a duty and a responsibility to do things that we should expect them to do. Get back to people within 72 hours. Have parts on hand, so when things break, as we know they'll break, it doesn't take months to order new parts and get them to the chair and get chairs fixed. So, you know, it's not a very complex bill, but it's really important, and I think and it's something that is still in play for this session, and we hope we can get done.
Yeah, it's such a good bill.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we will be moving it in the House very soon, and we'll continue to advocate for it because those consumer protection issues, right? When it's something that essential to your mobility and your ability to get around and be in your community, like we got to make sure that folks have access.
Yeah, and it's been interesting. The bill passed at the end of last session on the Senate side. I chair the Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure Committee this year in the Senate, and so the bill actually worked its way through my committee, and we were able to get it out faster, to get it a favorable report, to get it to the Senate floor for a vote, to debate it. Which I'm excited about, but it's been interesting to just be the primary sponsor of the bill in one session, and then to not just write and file the bill, but for it to come through the committee process, be reported out, shepherd it through the Senate again. So yeah, to your point, there's a lot of good things in there, and there are a lot of different initiatives like that we are racing kind of against the clock to get done before the end of the session in July.
Yeah, some of the biggest challenges, right, with 6,300, 6,500 bills is how do you create a sense of urgency that this bill needs to rise above the others and get done this session and can't wait until another session.
Right.
So it's just a really tough role. And one of the other hats that you wear, kind of helping shepherd a lot of good legislation for communities like ours, is co-chair of the Gateway Cities Caucus. Can you talk a little bit? We highlighted it last year when it was kind of, you were taking on the new role as chair. Can you talk about kind of how the Gateway Cities Caucus comes together and what we're all focusing on? So
it is the platform in the legislature that I love the most, and I feel like I am able to have some of the biggest impacts with. But gateway cities are cities like Fitchburg and Leominster, for those at home that don't know, that are mid-sized urban communities that have really been left behind in the 20th century. They're old legacy economies that are reinventing themselves now and innovating. But have higher levels of poverty, lower levels of education than the median in the state. So Fitchburg and Leominster are two of the 26 of those communities. The Gateway Cities Caucus in the legislature is made up of senators and representatives that represent those 26 communities. There is a House co-chair, Tony Cabral, Representative Cabral from New Bedford. I chair on the Senate side. And really what it is, it speaks to what you just said. And a huge challenge for us in the legislature is there's 200 of us. We file more than 6,000 bills. How do you build momentum and energy and just get attention to issues? And how do you differentiate your issues from that pile of 6,000 bills? So the answer is coalition building, right? And partnerships and working together. And the challenge is getting people from different parts of the state, from the South Coast, from Springfield, from Worcester, from North Worcester County, to rally around the same ideas. We've had some huge wins working through the caucus to do that, because I think the challenges that Fitchburg and Leominster face are challenges that New Bedford and Fall River and West Springfield face, you name it. Different initiatives around housing, different initiatives around how we invest and revitalize our downtowns. We share a lot of the same challenges around healthcare. Gateway cities have high public payer or Mass Health and Medicaid payer rates. And as we know here in Leominster and we know here in North Worcester County, that's affected our ability to provide and maintain essential services. So the Gateway Cities Caucus is we come together every month. We usually have presentations from experts on the budget, on the hot button issue of the day, but we're solution oriented and legislative action oriented. So when we come together and we speak with one voice, we can get a lot more than me yelling at the wall in Fitchburg or Leominster. So it's a role I've enjoyed and one where I think we're able to make some significant policy gains. Yeah, it's one of the cool ways that we get to come together, whether it be similar districts, the North Central delegation, right, or around issue areas. I've gotten to co-chair the Library Legislative Caucus. Everyone loves libraries.
but
Not
it doesn't always.
yeah.
But it doesn't always rise to the top of your budget asks, and
Right.
so we've had to really try to figure out how to lift up those needs. And the pandemic kind of shone a light on how our libraries have been these community centers. They're not just a place where you get
And a
books or
librarian
content.
is like the most essential social worker in the state, right? I mean, they can connect you with the people in your community, the services that exist in the community. So yeah, to your point, great work in the library.
Yeah, and just it's a cool place to find that commonality. And you talked a little bit about what's going on in Washington and how frustrated folks can be about the national government. However, in Massachusetts, even though we have by far a supermajority of Dems, almost everything that we work on is actually bipartisan.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be. But we all want the same thing for our community. We might have a little different idea of how we get there, but that's where the good debate can happen. And one of the things that I'm really grateful that we get to be a part of the Massachusetts State Legislature, which I do think operates a lot more differently than many other legislatures across the country.
And we don't have the luxury of putting party before people or party before our community. Local and state government is where the rubber really hits the road. And one of the things that I think makes legislators like yourself and me better is we don't have anywhere to hide, right? Like when we go into our grocery store, people they expect us to deliver. And so I think that leads to a lot of bipartisan collaboration, which I think people don't, people think politics is so, there's so much vitriol. I don't think that's the case with our Republican colleagues and the independents that we work with. I know one thing that we're proud of in North Central is that our region has the only tripartisan delegation in the state. And that's true, right? Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, I mean, we come together and we speak with one voice because the things that our community needs and the challenges that North Central face really need people to come together and work on bipartisan solutions.
So what else are you looking forward to heading into the spring, heading into budget and end of session? What are you working on that you want to share with our viewers?
So there's a lot. One is delivering for the Leominster Relief Fund. I am so frustrated that the city hasn't gotten more direct support right now from the federal government, and state government is going to step up. And so I look forward to continuing to partner with you to really, again, deliver meaningful relief for a city that has been through so much after those floods. And in so many ways, I think it was Leominster's finest hour. I think I am grateful for Mayor Mazzarella's leadership through the flood. It is a miracle, and I don't think it gets said enough. It is a miracle that we didn't lose anybody that night. And the dozens of rescues that were executed by fire, police, EMT, it makes me emotional to think about. But really an incredibly trying period, but the city's so resilient. So it's a priority for me to come back. We've appropriated that $15 million. $1 million went to Fitchburg. Leominster is going to get more than its fair share coming to it from that pot. But I'd like to come back and get some more resources to the Leominster Relief Fund. The regional priorities that we're working on right now at the State House are really important. And I think Devens is a part of the Worcester and Middlesex district that I represent. And it's really key to become the economic engine for North Central Massachusetts. If you haven't driven through Devens recently, it's incredible what's going on there. But Commonwealth Fusion has more than 500 engineers employed doing cutting-edge R&D that I can't describe, so I won't try to do it on tape. But New England Studios, Bristol-Myers Squibb, North American headquarters. I mean, there are more 21st century innovation economy jobs there that create other jobs. But the Devens Enterprise Zone that was set up in 1993 is at the caps for commercial and residential development that was set nearly 30 years ago. So one of the things that we are proposing and I'm trying to do and that the governor has proposed and we're going to look to get done in the economic development bill we'll be taking up and all the time that we have between now and July.
Folks will be surprised at how much we can get done in those final 3 months
in addition to a housing bond bill that we're going to get done too. But allowing for more residential construction at Devens is a major priority. I think we have a housing crisis. We have 200,000 units that that is the goal for the state to catch up to where we should be, to allow for new growth. And there's a huge opportunity for North Central. If we can build housing, we're going to attract more jobs. And we're going to make this region more competitive for young families to live, to stay, to raise their kids here, which is what we want. So there's a cap on the how many residential units can exist at Devens. I'd like to get rid of that between now and July. So that's a goal for me. And again, I think it's gonna help that economic growth and vitality here in the region.
Well, and those jobs have been an incredible boost to our community, and also just thinking about what the studios have done and bolstering programming at the Mount and Fitchburg State. Fitchburg State was already a leader in the country in terms of their audiovisual programming, but to be able to help folks find these jobs working on serial shows rather than just movies.
And create those pathways to these great jobs.
Yeah, it's just such a cool thing to see that industry flourish, and the way that it's making investments in smaller towns.
Yeah.
Right, the Air, Shirley, and all around, to be able to see the films filmed right there, the investments in the community. We had James Bond filming at CM Pizza, right? I mean, yeah, that's totally cool. And that's because of tax credits that the legislature extended. Yeah, it was early days of the pandemic. I was watching a TV show and I was like, that looks so familiar. It was Downtown Air. And I was like, oh, they didn't even like change the facade. Yeah. But those are investments that often happen in Boston, right? Like with the iconic Boston scenery. Sure. But they're bringing more and more out to Central Mass, where it boosts the entire economy in ways that they're trying to capture, but it really spills out with investments in the hotels and small businesses. Yeah,
they come in and pay sticker for hardware or costumes, you name it. So catering, right, is another big one. So yeah, exciting.
That's awesome. And so one of the other places that you've really been doing a lot of work in is vocational education and making sure that there's more access to vocational schools. My family are products of our Leominster CTI, and my brother is a new educator at CTI. And so we know just how important this education is. But for so many Massachusetts students, they don't have access.
Yes. So it's important for so many reasons to increase pathways to vocational education. One, it creates incredible economic opportunity for kids, right? There is no path to the middle class that I think is straighter than being able to access a trade school education in high school, participate in co-op in a high school. You know, there are kids at Leominster, as you know, there are kids at Monty Tech who are making $20, $30 an hour in co-op. And when they graduate, they have a skill set that is really not only going to allow them to stay here in North Central, but really thrive. I have a friend who says, the richest person I know is my plumber. He's got the biggest boat, right? And that's true. I mean, there is such an opportunity to start businesses, to join a union, to make a great living with a trade school education. Unfortunately, it is harder for kids to access that education than it ever has been before. There were nearly 20,000 applications for 10,000 seats to ninth grade for Chapter 74 vocational school programs across the state. And one of the consequences of that demand is that more graduates from those programs are going to college, and less graduates are going into the workforce in the trades that programs that they participated. So we want every kid to be able to access a trade in Massachusetts. I have filed a bill that we are going to be working with the Gateway City Caucus on, but to get trades back into high schools and comprehensive high schools in a meaningful way, and tailor those offerings to juniors and seniors. So we have done some great work on early college across the state, and kids at Leominster High School with partnerships at Mount Wachusett Community College. We have kids from Leominster or Gardner who are graduating from high school basically with an associate's degree. So saving themselves and their families tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars is literally. But I think we are reimagining what high school looks like in Massachusetts right now in a way I think we should have a long time ago. And I think part of that vision is some kids are going to go down the hallway to early college and get on that pathway to higher education. We want kids to be able to go as juniors and seniors and participate in a trade program in comprehensive high schools too. And we can do that at costs. It costs $444 million to build a new trade school. There are complex regional agreements that make that politically very difficult to do and economically not fiscally feasible in a lot of places, and especially gateway cities. So I filed legislation to, through the outside of the MSBA process, using the millionaire's tax to put VOC annexes at comprehensive high schools and to create partnerships with trade schools that'll allow those comprehensives. So like a Leominster High School model.
I think folks forget that, like, we take for granted that we have our own vocational
and
education.
we want that across the state, right? I think Leominster is the model that needs to be replicated, but we can provide carpentry or plumbing or HVAC at Fitchburg High School and Gardner High School. So I've filed legislation that would allow the construction of 3,000 to 5,000 square foot annexes. And we're sitting right now at Leominster Access TV, and the model would be a light construction footprint like this, that at cost we could build outside of the MSBA process for $2 or $3 or maybe $4 million. And again, create new pathways for kids who are going into the labor market after they graduate high school and don't have access to a trade right now in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and jobs that we desperately need in our community because it's an aging workforce, and something that comes up when we meet with the Chamber of Commerce and everyone. Like, we really need to figure out how to get more folks into these pathways.
And we've got very ambitious goals, right? We want to build 200,000 more units of housing. We have a couple of bridges to Cape Cod that we are planning on building. We have a lot of work that needs to happen across our MBTA and our public transportation system. We can't do that with a smaller labor force and a smaller workforce in the trades than we have today. So we can't meet those goals unless we train the workforce to do it. And if we do it, we're going to create a lot of economic opportunity for young people in our community, and that's the name of the game.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of times that this is the busiest part of the two-year legislative session. If you want to get in touch with Senator Cronin, what's the easiest way for folks to reach you?
The best way is to send my office an email, john.cronin@masenate.gov. But you can send us a message on Facebook. You can call our office, 617-722-1230, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. But as you know, nobody does constituent services as well as Representative Higgins, but we try our best to keep up with her. So if there is any state issue or anything that we can be helpful with, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office.
Yeah, as we're wrapping up, we've been hearing a little bit more about unemployment-related issues. We had kind of seen a huge rush during the pandemic. They kind of slowed down, but they're starting to creep up again. So if you're having issues with your unemployment, if you're having issues with your Mass Health recertification, housing continues to be the #1 issue folks are reaching out to. Remember that if you're having an issue with any state-level agency, you can reach out to us. We're happy to help. And if you're not sure what level of government it is, if it's not us, we're happy to connect you. My contact information will pop up, but you can always reach out to us at 978-227-5278 at our Leominster District office, and email me at natalie.higgins@mahouse.gov. Senator Cronin, thank you so much. Looking forward to what will be a sprint to July 31st.
Absolutely, and I couldn't have a better partner than you, and it's a privilege to represent the city of Leominster with you.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Look forward to coming back.
Take care, everyone.